We live in an era of unparalleled physical comfort and instant global connectivity. Yet millions of people report feeling completely hollow. They describe a state called languishing, an empty, apathetic void where an individual lacks symptoms of mental illness but feels entirely devoid of vitality. As the dual continua model demonstrates, the absence of illness does not equal the presence of flourishing. On one axis, we track clinical disorders, on the other, well-being. It is possible to be clinically healthy while remaining completely stagnant in the middle. To bridge that gap, we have to look at the brain's biological hardware. Our subjective feeling of joy is managed by 4 neurochemicals. Dopamine rewards goal achievement. Serotonin regulates emotional stability. Oxytocin builds social trust, and endorphins alleviate physical stress. These chemicals evolved purely as rewards for fundamental survival behaviors, not as mechanisms to sustain a permanent, unbroken state of joy. This creates a structural mismatch. We are running ancient biological hardware inside a digital environment that demands constant, unnatural bliss. This mismatch is most visible in the Arrival Fallacy, the pervasive cognitive illusion that hitting a specific milestone, like a promotion or a wealth target, will result in permanent contentment. This graph reveals why achievements often feel hollow. During the pursuit of a goal, your brain releases a steady buildup of dopamine, but the moment you cross the threshold, those levels plummet. This is an evolutionary mechanism. The brain rapidly clears its reward circuitry to make psychological room for the next objective. Social media platforms exploit this circuit through a variable ratio reinforcement schedule, the same logic used in slot machines. By delivering notifications and likes at unpredictable intervals, they trigger rapid, chaotic dopamine spikes. Over time, your receptors downregulate to cope with the flood, making it difficult to derive pleasure from natural, real-world rewards. We compound this biological drain with toxic positivity. By demanding a cheerful facade and suppressing authentic negative emotions, we trigger physiological stress that leads directly to burnout and emotional exhaustion. Chasing happiness through digital hits and forced optimism leads to a biological dead end. It downregulates our reward centers, ensuring a state of languishing. Ancient philosophers identified this trap millennia ago. Socrates and Plato explicitly warned that the pursuit of immediate sensory pleasure traps the individual in an endless cycle of desire and temporary satiation. Aristotle proposed a different goal, eudaimonia. He defined it as flourishing, an active, ongoing process of realizing your unique potential through virtue. For Aristotle, flourishing was not a passive feeling, but an activity of the soul. Friedrich Nietzsche took this even further, arguing that friction is the necessary crucible for the creation of meaning. He believed that a life oriented solely toward comfort and the avoidance of pain is devoid of value. The philosophical consensus is clear. Humans are built for friction. A meaningful life requires accepting purposeful struggle and rejecting the pursuit of perfect comfort. We can see this play out globally by comparing different cultural frameworks. Individualistic societies treat happiness as a personal achievement or an acquisition, but in collectivistic and Nordic cultures, well-being is tied to communal harmony and shared purpose. In Scandinavia, concepts like the Danish hygge, focusing on presence and simple pleasures, and the Swedish lagom, meaning just enough, promote a life of balance. These philosophies act as a cultural brake, slowing the drive toward hyperconsumerism and overwork. The 2026 World Happiness Report reflects these values. Finland, Iceland, and Denmark consistently top the rankings. These nations achieve high well-being scores through social safety nets and documented high levels of societal trust. Costa Rica also reaches the top of the 2026 rankings through Buen Vivir. This indigenous approach prioritizes living in harmony with the community and the natural environment, proving that high well-being is achievable without the high economic output of the West. Lasting happiness is achieved obliquely. It arises as a byproduct of social connection and connection to the environment, rather than through the direct competitive pursuit of individual achievement. For older generations, the metrics of success were often defined by materialistic acquisition. In Singapore, for instance, this was the era of the 5 Cs: cash, car, credit card, condominium, and country club. But for Generation Z, those metrics have broken down. They are paralyzed by a digital paradox of choice and trapped in a high-pressure landscape that often demands the sacrifice of personal health just to keep up. In response, youth are increasingly adopting quiet thriving. This involves re-engaging with their environments through micro-goal setting and personal empowerment, seeking to carve out autonomy within existing structures. For many, this desire for control eventually outgrows traditional employment. In 2026, entrepreneurship levels among the youth surged as Gen Z sought to reclaim creative control over their lives. These young business owners report significantly higher levels of optimism and purpose compared to their peers on traditional career paths. This shift requires a return to instinct. As actor Cillian Murphy argues, you have to trust your gut over intellectual rationalization. By choosing instinct over the analytical paralysis of the digital age, this generation is trading artificial dopamine hits for authentic growth. Our society has operated on the false belief that happiness is a passive, permanent state to be acquired and hoarded. Bertrand Russell offered a more resilient foundation. He argued that true emotional stability comes from the full acknowledgement that the world is inherently difficult. By accepting the reality of disappointment, we remove the secondary suffering caused by our own resistance. Chasing constant positive affect is biologically unsustainable, but pursuing eudaimonia, a life of virtue and meaning, aligns with our hardware. It allows for a stable, resilient form of well-being that is independent of ideal conditions. Ultimately, happiness is not the destination. It's the intermittent neurobiological reward we experience while traversing a path of virtue, deep social connection,